The gavel that once condemned hundreds will soon be silenced, because I, the judge, have been judged by the voice of eternity. My name is Kareem al-Rahman. For years, I sat high upon the bench of an Islamic court, feared and respected as a man of discipline and authority. My words carried weight. My rulings shaped lives. And yes, it is true. Over the span of my career, I sentenced Christians to death. Not one case, not one day, but again and again, over time. Different trials, different people. Men, women, even the elderly. By the end, more than 500 souls had been condemned under my gavel. To some, I was a defender of faith. To others, a tyrant cloaked in robes of law. But inside, beneath the robes, I was haunted. I prayed the prayers. I memorized the verses. I fasted. I disciplined myself. I judged in the name of the law. And still my soul was empty. Heaven gave me no answer. My prayers echoed back with silence. And in the silence, doubt gnawed at me like a relentless wolf. I tried to bury it. I told myself I was strong, that the law was enough. But you cannot bury truth forever. It was during one ordinary trial, so ordinary I can hardly remember the name of the accused, that everything changed. The courtroom was full, the air heavy with tension. I raised my voice to deliver another sentence, the same way I had done countless times before. But before the words could leave my lips, my chest tightened. My vision blurred. The walls of the courtroom swayed. The voices of lawyers and witnesses faded into a deafening silence. And then, darkness. At first, I thought it was death, that perhaps my heart had failed, and the grave had opened to swallow me whole. But then, through the suffocating blackness, there came a light. Not a flicker, not a candle, but a brilliance more real than anything I had ever seen. A light that pierced through me, stripping away every pretense, every lie, every excuse. In that moment, I was no longer a judge. I was the accused. And then, he spoke. Kareem, a voice, stronger than thunder, yet gentler than a whisper. A voice filled with both authority and love. It was Jesus, not the figure I had dismissed in debates, not the name I'd signed on death warrants. This was the living Christ, standing in the light, looking into the depths of my soul. Why have you judged without truth? Why have you condemned those who carry my name, while you yourself never knew me? His words shattered me. I wanted to resist, to defend myself, to say I was only upholding the law. But in that light, all my excuses crumbled. Every face of those I had sentenced rushed before me, not as criminals, but as souls who bore his name with courage I had never understood. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I was not the judge. I was the judged. The gavel I had used to condemn others now fell against my own heart. And the one who spoke to me was not offering ritual or tradition. He was offering truth. Truth that cut deeper than any law I had ever upheld. This is my testimony, but it is more than that. It is a warning, because the same voice that broke into my life is speaking even now to you. But before I continue, I must ask, where are you listening from? What time is it as these words reach you? Tell me in the comments below, because this is not only my journey. It is an awakening meant for all who dare to hear. And if you feel that stirring in your heart, if you have ever wondered whether God could break through the silence, do not turn away. Subscribe now. Join this community of seekers, because the revelations that follow may be the last warning before eternity itself breaks in. My name is Kareem al-Rahman, and before the day I heard the voice of Jesus, my life was defined by order, discipline, and law. I was not born into power, but I pursued it with every breath. From my earliest years, I was trained to respect authority, to uphold tradition, to never question the words of my teachers. By the time I ascended to the position of judge, I had become the embodiment of the system that raised me. Unyielding, uncompromising, untouchable. To the people, I was a pillar of strength. When I entered the courtroom, silence followed me like a shadow. Men lowered their voices, women pulled their veils tighter, and even the guards stiffened with fear. My black robe became my armor, my gavel, my sword. Every sentence I pronounced carried the weight of the state, and none dared to oppose me. But power has a way of isolating a man. My family respected me, yes, but they also feared me. My colleagues praised me in public, but in their eyes I saw something else. Envy, suspicion, even hatred. Yet I convinced myself this was the price of honor. Better to be feared than forgotten, I told myself. Better to be obeyed than ignored. Still, beneath that polished surface, there was a hollowness I could not escape. I prayed the prescribed prayers. I fasted when commanded. I performed every ritual to perfection. Yet every time I bowed, every time I lifted my hands to heaven, the silence pressed in. Where was God? Why did my words feel like smoke vanishing into the air? I told myself doubt was weakness, so I buried it. I replaced the ache with strictness, the emptiness with judgment. And in that stern exterior, I found a terrible kind of refuge. It was during those years that the trials of Christians began crossing my desk. They were accused of spreading lies, of disrupting order, of dishonoring faith. Each one stood trembling before me, accused not of theft, not of murder, but of refusing to deny Jesus. To me, they were rebels. To the law, they were guilty. And so, one after another, I condemned them. 500 in total, across years of rulings. Not in a single day, not in one crowded trial, but scattered like drops of blood across the span of my career. Some wept, some prayed, some stared at me with eyes full of fire, as if they knew a truth I could not see. But I silenced their voices with the strike of my gavel. Guilty, death. Next case. Their faces haunted me. I did not admit it to anyone, not even to myself, but at night their eyes would return in my dreams. Eyes that were not afraid of death. Eyes that seemed to pierce through my judgments and ask a question I could not answer. What is truth? I tried to drown the memories in more discipline. I became stricter, harsher, building walls around my heart. I told myself I was defending faith, protecting order, serving God. But deep inside, the question never left me. If I was truly serving God, why did I feel so far from Him? If I was truly righteous, why did my prayers echo back like mockery? There's a loneliness that comes with power, but there's a greater loneliness that comes with doubt. I lived with both. By day, I was the judge who could not be shaken. By night, I was a man tormented by silence. And yet I kept going. I believed obedience would eventually bring peace. I believed if I judged enough cases, prayed enough prayers, condemned enough enemies, maybe the emptiness would go away. But it never did. What I did not know then was that every gavel strike, every sentence, every soul I condemned was leading me to one inevitable moment. The moment when the judge of eternity would confront me. The moment when silence would break. And it happened not in a grand chamber, not in a night of prayer, not in the solitude of fasting. It happened in the middle of an ordinary trial, on a day I least expected. But before I tell you how that day unfolded, let me ask you, have you ever done everything right, followed every rule, and yet still felt empty inside? If you have, you already know a piece of my story. Share it in the comments, because your honesty may awaken another soul tonight. And if you feel the weight of this emptiness pressing against your own life, don't wait as I did. Subscribe now, join us, and walk with those who refuse to stay blind. Because what happened next in my courtroom was not just for me, it may be for you. The day it happened began like any other. The sun rose over the city, indifferent to the burdens it cast upon my shoulders. I walked into the courthouse draped in my black robe, my face a mask of stern authority. To those who watched me enter, I was immovable, untouchable, the embodiment of justice. But inside I was weary. The docket was full that morning. Faces blurred together, anxious defendants, ambitious lawyers, restless guards. Another day of judgments, another day of pronouncing verdicts with the weight of finality. I told myself I had done this hundreds of times, that today would be no different. But I was wrong. As I sat behind the bench, a strange heaviness pressed against my chest. I tried to ignore it. Judges do not show weakness. We are statues of law, immovable and unshaken. So I straightened my back, lifted the gavel, and demanded silence in the chamber. My voice carried across the room, firm as stone, though inside I felt something cracking. The defendant stood before me, a young man, trembling, accused of crimes that now seemed so trivial. He looked at me not with fear, but with something I could not name. His eyes did not plead for mercy. They pierced straight through me. And for the first time in years, I felt as though I were the one on trial. The air grew thick, every breath a burden. I forced myself to speak, but the words tangled on my tongue. The chamber tilted. The voices of lawyers, guards, and witnesses began to blur into noise. My vision darkened at the edges, as though a veil were being drawn across my eyes. I tried to grip the gavel tighter, to steady myself with the last fragment of dignity. But my hand trembled. My chest burned. The walls of the courtroom seemed to close in. And then, silence. It was not the silence of respect, nor the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of death. A void swallowed every sound, as though the world itself had been muted. The shuffling of feet, the murmurs of the crowd, even the beating of my own heart, gone. I felt myself slipping away, as if the ground had opened beneath me. The courtroom, the walls, the faces, they dissolved like mist in the morning sun, and I was falling. At first, there was only blackness, heavy, suffocating, endless. I reached for air, but found nothing. I reached for the strength that had carried me all these years, but it was gone. I was stripped of everything: title, authority, robe, law. I was no longer a judge. I was simply a soul adrift in a void. The descent felt eternal. Time had no meaning here. Seconds stretched into years. Years collapsed into moments. I wondered if this was hell, if this was the final reward for a life of false obedience and hollow prayers. For the first time in my existence, I knew the taste of fear, the kind of fear that no authority, no law, no gavel could silence. The deeper I sank, the more the darkness seemed alive. It whispered of every sentence I had given, every soul I had condemned. Faces began to emerge in the void, faces of those Christians I had judged over the years. Their eyes burned, not with anger, but with sorrow. Their silence was louder than any accusation. It pressed upon me, crushing, unbearable. I wanted to cry out, to plead, to ask for mercy, but my voice was gone. The judge who had commanded entire courtrooms was now voiceless in the abyss. And then, just when I thought the blackness would consume me forever, something shifted. A flicker, a glow. At first, faint, like the first star breaking through the night sky. Then brighter, stronger, expanding until it cut through the darkness like a sword of fire. The void recoiled as the light grew, and for the first time in this descent, I felt warmth. Not the warmth of the sun, but something purer, deeper. I could not move, yet I was drawn toward it. The silence that had suffocated me now trembled with anticipation, as though even the darkness knew it was about to be unmasked. And then, I heard it. A voice, stronger than thunder, yet softer than a whisper. A voice that carried eternity within every syllable. It called my name, Kareem. The sound of my name rang through the void, echoing with power I cannot describe. It was not merely heard, it was felt. It trembled through my bones, pierced my soul, and awakened something long buried within me. In the silence of eternity, a single word, my name, shattered the darkness. And then I saw him. The light that had first flickered now blazed into a brilliance that filled everything. It was not like sunlight, not like fire, not like any glow this world has ever known. It was alive. It pulsed with love, with truth, with purity so unrelenting that I wanted to flee, yet I could not look away. In the center of that light stood a figure, radiant, clothed not in robes of this world, but in garments of glory. His face shone brighter than the sun, yet I could see him with perfect clarity. Every part of me knew who he was, even before he spoke again. It was Jesus, the same Jesus whose followers I had condemned, the same name I had signed on execution orders without hesitation. And yet here he was, not as rumor, not as legend, but as living reality before me. My knees buckled, my soul trembled. Every defense, every argument I had prepared for a lifetime of rulings collapsed in his presence. I had faced rulers, generals, and men of immense authority, but nothing compared to standing before him. His eyes met mine, and in that gaze I saw everything. He did not need to accuse me. He did not need to read a list of my sins. His eyes pierced me, unveiling every hidden thought, every selfish ambition, every cruelty disguised as justice. Why, Kareem? His voice thundered. It was tender, filled with sorrow more than wrath. Why do you judge without truth? Why do you condemn those who carry my name, while you yourself never knew me? The words crushed me. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say I was only upholding the law, only obeying the traditions handed down to me. But in the light, excuses withered. My mouth opened, but no defense came. My robe of authority, the symbol of my pride, was stripped away in his presence. I stood exposed, naked, not in body but in soul. Memories flooded back in an instant. The faces of those 500 Christians I had sentenced. Their tears, their prayers, their calm defiance in the face of death. I called them guilty. Yet here, before the author of truth, I saw who was guilty. And it was me. My heart broke. I collapsed into weeping, though I had no tears in this place. I was undone. A man who had condemned others now condemned by the truth of his own actions. And yet, in his voice, I did not hear hatred. I did not hear scorn. I heard grief. I heard love. A love so fierce, so unrelenting, that it hurt more than any accusation. I called you, Kareem, and you did not listen. I showed you my people, and you silenced them. I reached for you, and you turned away. But still, I am here. I trembled, unable to lift my head. How could he still come for me, after all I had done? How could the one I had rejected stand before me now, speaking my name with such tenderness? His presence burned, yet it healed. It exposed, yet it embraced. In his gaze, I saw both justice and mercy intertwined in ways I could not comprehend. I felt smaller than dust, yet somehow, I felt seen, fully known, yet not abandoned. I whispered, though my voice shook, "Lord, I did not know." And he answered, "Now you do, and the truth will set you free." The light swelled around me, consuming every shadow. The darkness that had once smothered me fled in terror. His voice, his presence, his love, it filled everything. And in that moment, I realized the greatest truth of my life. I'd spent years pretending to be a judge. But here, before him, I had finally met the true judge, the one who judges in righteousness, yet offers mercy to the unworthy. When the vision faded, I felt myself pulled backward, as though an unseen hand was drawing me out of eternity and thrusting me into flesh once more. The brilliance of the light dimmed. The silence of heaven gave way to the noise of earth. And then, suddenly, I was back. My body hit the bench with a jolt. My chest heaved as though I'd been drowning. The courtroom came into focus, the guards rushing forward, the lawyers shouting, the crowd gasping. To them, it must have seemed I had collapsed. Perhaps they thought I had fainted or that death had seized me for good. But inside, I knew the truth. I had stood in judgment before the eternal judge. I tried to rise, but my legs shook beneath me. The robe that once gave me authority now felt like a weight of shame. My lips parted, desperate to speak, to declare what I had just seen. But the words caught in my throat. How could I explain to these people that I had heard the voice of Jesus, that I had been shown the hidden machinery of the world, that the one whose followers I condemned had confronted me face to face? Yet I could not keep silent. With trembling hands, I gripped the edge of the bench and forced myself upright. I must tell you what has happened," I said. The room stilled. Every eye turned toward me, and I spoke. Not of the law, not of the case before me, but of the light. I told them I had heard the voice of Jesus. I told them I had seen visions of deception, of nations enslaved, of darkness ruling through hidden hands. I told them that truth was not in law or ritual, but in him. Gasps filled the chamber. Some rose in outrage. Others whispered in horror. My colleagues stared at me as though I had gone mad. The guards looked to one another, unsure if they should silence me. One lawyer shouted, "Blasphemy!" Another sneered, "He is delirious." But I continued. I had to. For once in my life, I was not judging, I was testifying. When I finally finished, the courtroom erupted. Some demanded my removal. Others called for an inquiry. But none believed me. That night, word spread quickly. By morning, I was no longer a respected judge, but a man branded insane, dangerous, even a traitor. My own family turned against me. My colleagues, who once bowed their heads in respect, now crossed the street to avoid me. I had spent my life feared for my authority. Now I was despised for my testimony. And yet, despite their rejection, a strange peace settled upon me. For the first time, I knew what it meant to stand in truth. Still, the cost was heavy. Friends I had known for years cut ties with me. Invitations stopped. Whispers followed me wherever I walked. My career was finished. The gavel I once held with pride now gathered dust, a relic of a life I could never return to. Loneliness pressed hard against me. Nights stretched long, filled with questions. Had I lost my mind? Had grief or guilt conjured a vision to torment me? But then, in the stillness, I would hear his words echo again. You must testify. You must tell the world what you have seen. And I knew it had been real. More real than the courtroom. More real than the robes. More real than the life I had built. I understood, then, that following this call would not make me loved. It would not restore my reputation. It would not bring comfort or ease. It would cost me everything, my status, my relationships, perhaps even my life. But it would give me truth. And truth, I had learned, was worth more than the approval of men. So I resolved in my heart, I would testify. Whether they mocked me, rejected me, or sought to destroy me, I would not remain silent. For I had seen the light. I had heard his voice. And once a man has stood before Jesus, there is no going back. After the day of my collapse, nothing in my life was the same. The courtroom, once my kingdom, became my prison. Every time I entered, the whispers grew louder, the stares sharper. Where once there had been respect, now there was only suspicion. Where once men bowed in deference, now they whispered in contempt. I tried to carry on, to fulfill my duties as judge, but the weight of truth pressed against me like chains I could not ignore. Each case, each verdict, each moment, I lifted the gavel. It all felt hollow, like play acting in a theater of lies. My hands trembled when I sentenced the guilty, not from fear of men, but from the memory of the light. How could I condemn another soul when I myself had stood condemned before Jesus? The law no longer satisfied me. Ritual no longer gave me peace. Authority no longer brought me comfort. I was dying inside, shackled to a system I now saw for what it truly was, a machinery of deception. The turning point came one morning when I looked in the mirror. The face that stared back at me was not the strong, unshakable judge the world knew. It was the face of a broken man, haunted eyes, trembling lips, a soul consumed by fire. I realized then that I could not live divided. I could not serve truth while wearing robes of deception. So I resigned. The announcement shook the court. My colleagues were stunned, my family bewildered. They demanded explanations I could not give. To them, I muttered words of weakness, of illness, of personal struggle. But in my heart, I knew the real reason. I had seen the eternal judge, and I could no longer serve the false authority of men. Walking away from the court felt like walking away from my identity. The robe had defined me. The gavel had given me purpose. The power had made me who I was. And now, stripped of all of it, I felt naked before the world. The isolation was brutal. My family distanced themselves, ashamed of the scandal I'd caused. Former friends avoided me, unwilling to be associated with a man they believed had lost his mind. Invitations ceased. Doors closed. Whispers followed me wherever I went. Nights became the hardest. Alone in the silence, I replayed everything I'd seen and heard. The light, the voice, the visions of nations enslaved, the faces of the 500 Christians. At times, I wondered if it had been a dream, a hallucination born of exhaustion. But then his words would echo again in my spirit. You must testify. You must tell the world what you have seen. That sentence burned within me like fire in my bones. I could not extinguish it. No matter how much I tried to return to an ordinary life, his call pulled me deeper. I knew that if I remained silent, I would be complicit in the very deception I had been shown. I began to write. Pages and pages of testimony poured from my heart. I wrote about the light, the voice, the visions of deception. I wrote about the emptiness of ritual without truth, about the machinery of control I had seen. I wrote not as a judge, but as a witness, a man who had encountered eternity and could never be the same. But even as I wrote, fear lingered. I knew that speaking openly would bring persecution. It would cost me safety, perhaps even my life. Yet in the silence of a night, I remembered the faces of those 500 Christians. They had stood unshaken before death, their eyes fixed not on me, but on the one I had now encountered. If they could endure with such faith, how could I remain silent? I realized then that my resignation was not the end of my calling. It was the beginning. The robe of law had fallen, but the mantle of testimony had been placed upon me. And though it was heavier than any robe I had ever worn, it was also the only one worth carrying. The world had cast me aside, but in that rejection, I finally found my mission. There are nights when I still wake trembling, not from dreams, but from memory. For though the light of Jesus brought me peace, it also brought me a burden I cannot carry alone. For in those final moments of my encounter, he showed me something I have never forgotten. A revelation meant not only for me, but for you who are hearing my voice now. After he spoke of the deception in the world and the machinery of control, the visions continued. I saw a horizon, dark and storming, with nations gathered like armies preparing for war. Their banners promised peace, but their weapons betrayed their true intent. Crowds marched, chanting unity, but beneath their chants, I heard chains tightening around them. Smiles concealed daggers. Celebrations hid captivity. And above it all, one voice hissed like a serpent, "Bow, and you will live. Resist, and you will die." I fell to my knees in terror. Was this the destiny of mankind? Would all nations fall into this deception? I cried out in my soul, "Lord, is there no hope?" And then Jesus looked at me. His eyes, fire and love, met mine. "Kareem, the world will stumble in darkness, but my light cannot be overcome. I'm calling out a remnant, men and women who will not bow to lies, who will not surrender to fear. They will bear my name boldly, even when the world calls them mad. You must testify to awaken them, for the time is shorter than you think." Those words carved themselves into my spirit. The time is shorter than you think. I wanted to resist. I wanted to plead with him, "Lord, I am not worthy. I condemned your people. I silenced their voices. How can I now speak for you?" But he answered, "I do not call the worthy, Kareem. I call the willing. Your guilt has been burned away in my light. Now rise and speak." The light surged around me, and in that brilliance, I saw the faces of countless souls, men, women, and children, waiting, searching, longing for truth. Their eyes looked to me, but I knew they were not really looking at me. They were looking for him, the one I had encountered. And I realized that my testimony could be the bridge that led them to his light. Then his voice one last time, "Tell them I am coming soon. Tell them the hour is urgent. And tell them that those who deny me now will face me as judge, but those who receive me will know me as Savior." And then, darkness again. My eyes opened in the courtroom, gasping for breath, surrounded by men who could not understand what had just happened. But in my heart, I knew my life would never belong to me again. This is why I speak now. This is why I testify, though it cost me everything. Because what I saw was not for me alone, it was for you. You who are listening, do you not see the deception in this world? Do you not feel the weight of darkness pressing closer each day? You scroll through endless distractions. You chase after wealth, after comfort, after pleasure. But when the silence comes at night, does your soul not still ache for something real? Something eternal? I tell you, Jesus is real. I have seen him. I have heard his voice. And he is coming. The world may laugh at this. Some will call me delusional. Some will dismiss this as fantasy. But I would rather be mocked for speaking the truth than damned for hiding it. Now I must ask you, not as a judge, not as a man of power, but as a soul who once stood condemned, where do you stand? If eternity called your name tonight, would you be ready? Do not let pride silence you. Do not let fear bind you. Do not wait for tomorrow. Return to him now. Return to the Gospels. Return to the truth. Return to Christ. And if this testimony has stirred your heart, if even a whisper inside you says this is true, do not ignore it. Leave a comment below. Confess what weighs on you. Share this message so another soul may awaken. And subscribe, because the hour is late and the time is short. I was once the judge who condemned 500 Christians. But in the light, I discovered I was the one on trial. And mercy found me. That mercy is calling to you now. Will you listen? When I look back on my life, it feels as though I have lived 2 lifetimes. In the first, I was Kareem al-Rahman, judge of the court, a man feared, respected, untouchable. My gavel was law. My robe was power. My words carried the weight of life and death. In the eyes of men, I was great. But in the eyes of heaven, I was empty. In the second life, the one I now live, I am simply Kareem, a man who has stood before the true judge and found mercy I did not deserve. The difference between these 2 lives is not years or status or wealth. The difference is a single encounter. One voice, one moment in eternity when Jesus called my name. That moment shattered the walls I had built, stripped away the lies I had believed, and revealed the truth I had ignored. That without him, all my judgments, all my prayers, all my rituals were dust. I once believed I was strong. I now know I was blind. And blindness is worse than weakness, because it convinces you that you see when in truth you are stumbling in darkness. But Jesus opened my eyes. I tell you this not as a scholar, not as a preacher, not as a man seeking honor. I tell you as a witness. I was there. I heard his voice. I saw his light, and that light still burns in me. The world has rejected me. My career is gone. My family has turned their backs. My name, once respected, is now mocked. And yet, I have never been freer. Because for the first time in my life, I know who I am. I'm not a judge. I'm not a robe. I'm not a gavel. I'm a man rescued by grace. And now, I live with a burden. The burden of testimony. The burden of telling you what I have seen and heard, no matter the cost. Listen carefully. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. Eternity is real. And the time is short. Do not think you can outrun this truth. Do not think wealth will protect you. Do not think ritual will save you. I stood where you stand, trusting in law, in tradition, in reputation. And yet when the darkness swallowed me, none of those things could stand. Only his light, only his voice. If you're listening now, it is not an accident. This is your moment. This is your warning. Jesus is calling your name, just as he called mine. The question is, will you listen? Do not make the mistake I made, condemning those who carried his name while never knowing him myself. Do not silence the voice tugging at your heart. Do not wait until tomorrow, for tomorrow is not promised. Fall on your knees now, not before a court of men, but before the throne of heaven. Open the Gospels. Hear his words for yourself. Let his truth break the chains of deception. Let his love flood the emptiness inside you. And if this testimony has struck you, if you feel the weight of eternity pressing upon your soul, then act. Subscribe now. Share this message. Leave your confession in the comments below. Not for me, not for numbers, but because when you speak, you declare to the world and to yourself that you will not remain silent. I was once the judge who condemned 500 Christians. Today, I am the man who confesses I was blind and guilty, yet shown mercy by the one I condemned. That mercy is reaching for you now. Will you embrace it, or will you turn away? The choice is yours. But remember this, The gavel of men may fall lightly, but the gavel of heaven falls forever. And yet, if you are in Christ, mercy speaks louder than judgment. I found that mercy, and I beg you, before it is too late, find it for yourself.